Cheaper to make, they were, however, slow and heavy in action.
All right, folks, let's hop into a time machine and set the dial to the 1950s. Back when Elvis was the king, television dinners were the height of fine dining. And if you wanted to make a phone call, you actually had to dial a number with your finger and wait for it to spin back. Now, here's the thing. If you ask Gen Z about half of this stuff people used daily in the 50s, you'd probably get a blank stare and maybe a "wait, what?" in response. And honestly, we can't blame them. The world has changed so fast that some of these everyday items seem almost alien today. So join us as we uncover 25 everyday items from the 1950s Gen Z has never seen.
When dialing, notice that I brought my finger around until it firmly touched the finger stop.
The good old days when making a simple phone call was practically a workout for your fingers. Back in the 1950s, rotary phones were the way to stay connected. No touch screen, no voice commands, just a big, clunky dial with numbers arranged in a perfect circle. You'd stick your finger into the right hole, turn the dial all the way around, and then wait as it spun back into place before dialing the next digit. And heaven help you if the number had a bunch of nines or zeros, you'd be there for a while. Patience was key, and so was accuracy, because if you messed up, you had to start all over again.
By choosing a Jetta, you've rewarded yourself with a car that's full of driving excitement, intelligent engineering, and plenty of personality.
Back in the 1950s, watching television was a whole different experience. Forget binge-watching on a sleek flat screen. Families huddled around chunky black and white televisions, mesmerized by classics like I Love Lucy and The Twilight Zone. And trust me, nobody complained about the lack of color because the stories were just that good. But if you wanted a clear picture, you had to work for it. Those rabbit ear antennas on top of the television? Yeah, they needed constant tweaking. Sometimes it meant twisting them into weird positions, or even having someone stand in just the right spot to hold the signal. And if the screen got fuzzy, a few solid whacks on the side of the TV were the ultimate troubleshooting trick. Compared to today's crystal-clear, on-demand streaming, watching TV back then was almost a full-body workout. But, man, was it fun. Picture this. You wake up, stretch, and step outside to grab the morning paper, only to find a glass bottle of fresh, ice-cold milk waiting for you, delivered straight to your doorstep. No grocery store runs, no long lines, and definitely no last-minute "we're out of milk" emergencies. Back in the 1950s, the milkman was as much a part of daily life as the mail carrier. Dressed in crisp white uniforms, these friendly neighborhood deliverymen would drop off full bottles and collect the empties, ensuring families always had fresh dairy on hand. It was a simple but brilliant system, and honestly, kind of magical. But as supermarkets took over and refrigerators got better at keeping milk fresh for longer, this once essential service faded into history. Today, it's just a nostalgic memory, unless you count the occasional Amazon delivery guy. Back in the day, before computers and fancy word processors, if you needed to type up something, whether it was a letter, a school paper, or even a novel, you had to use a typewriter. And let me tell you, it was no joke. Every time you pressed a key, a tiny metal arm smacked an inked ribbon, stamping the letter onto paper with a satisfying clack. But here's the kicker. There was no backspace button. Made a typo? Tough luck. You either pulled out the correction fluid, which took forever to dry, or crumpled up the whole page and started over. And yet, there was something oddly satisfying about the rhythmic click, clack, ding of a typewriter in action.
Slide rules were used up until 1972, when the first pocket scientific calculator, the HP-35, was released.
Back in the day, way before fancy calculators and smartphones did the math for us, people had to rely on a genius little gadget called the slide rule. If you were an engineer, a scientist, or just a student trying to survive math class in the 1950s, this was your best friend. It looked like a ruler, but had sliding parts that let you do all kinds of complicated calculations. No buttons, no batteries, just pure brain power and precision. Mastering the slide rule wasn't just about moving pieces around. It took skill, patience, and a solid understanding of numbers. If you messed up, there was no handy backspace button to save you. But for those who knew how to use it, this tool was nothing short of magic. Proof that people back then were doing serious math before computers came along.
Check out the long line of cars waiting to get in at the Mission Tiki Drive-In Theater in Montclair, California.
Imagine, it's a warm summer night in the 1950s, and instead of scrolling through endless streaming options, you and your family hop into the car, grab some snacks, and head to the local drive-in theater. The excitement builds as you pull into your spot, attach a clunky metal speaker to your car window, and wait for the show to begin. Couples cuddled up in the front seat, kids in their pajamas sprawled out in the back, and groups of friends laughed and shared popcorn across their cars. The smell of buttery popcorn mixed with the cool night air, and the big screen flickered to life under a sky full of stars. It wasn't just about the movie. It was an experience, a social event, and a nostalgic slice of Americana that today's streaming generation will probably never get to fully appreciate.
1925 RCA portable radio. That is, if you can call something that weighs 57 pounds portable.
Back in the 1950s, if you wanted to listen to the radio, you couldn't just flip a switch and have music or news playing instantly like we do today. Nope. Radios back then ran on vacuum tubes, big, clunky glass tubes that needed time to heat up before they worked. So, turning on the radio wasn't just a quick press of a button. It was a little ritual. You'd switch it on, hear a faint hum, see the tubes start to glow, and then, after a few seconds, the sound would finally come through. It was like waiting for an old car to warm up on a winter morning. But once it was up and running, the rich, warm sound made it all worth it.
With the Sylvania Blue Dot Flash Cube, you're always ready for the great shots.
Capturing a moment in the 1950s often involved cameras with single-use flashbulbs. These bulbs produced a bright burst of light, ensuring proper exposure indoors. After each shot, the bulb had to be replaced, making photography a more deliberate act.
You could buy ice boxes, same as you bought refrigerators. Now, they were made by cabinet shops or metal shops or whatever they would.
All right, picture this. You open your fridge to grab a cold drink, but instead of humming quietly in the corner, it's just a wooden box with a giant chunk of ice inside. Sounds wild, right? Well, before electric refrigerators took over, that's exactly how people kept their food from spoiling. Back in the day, the icebox was the king of the kitchen. Families relied on the local iceman, yes, that was a real job, to deliver massive blocks of ice right to their doors. They'd slide these frozen behemoths into an insulated compartment, and as the ice slowly melted, it kept everything nice and chilly. Of course, this meant constantly replacing the ice, and let's be real, compared to today's smart fridges that can text you when you're out of milk, this whole setup feels straight out of the Stone Age. Back in the day, if you wanted to jam out to your favorite tunes, vinyl records were the way to go. But here's the cool part. If you wanted to listen for hours without getting up to flip the record, you needed a record changer. Think of it like the old-school version of a playlist. You'd stack several records on this nifty machine, and it would automatically drop the next one in the queue, letting you enjoy one song after another without missing a beat. No need to stop the music for a record change. It was a game changer. Sure, it was a bit mechanical compared to today's digital playlists, but there was something special about the sound of those records spinning and the little click of the needle dropping into place.
Rotary egg beater is the perfect equipment that can be used not only for beating eggs, but also for blending batters, sauces, salad dressings, and whipping cream.
It just hit differently, you know? Baking in the 1950s was a hands-on experience, and one of the key tools in the kitchen was the hand crank egg beater. You'd hold the handles and turn the crank yourself, putting in some serious elbow grease to beat up batters and creams. It wasn't just about getting the job done, it was part of the fun of baking. The rhythm of turning the crank and hearing that satisfying whir as you mixed things up gave you a sense of accomplishment. Fast forward to today, and electric mixers have taken over, speeding up the process and making it way easier. Sure, it's quicker, but there's something about that manual effort that made baking feel a bit more special, don't you think? The whole experience was way more personal, and let's be honest, a little bit of a workout too.
Diapering a boy? Make sure to double fold in the front for extra protection against leaks. Now use a Gerber diaper pin to enclose the diaper on each side.
Before the world of disposable diapers took over, parents had to get creative with cloth diapers. These were the real deal, washable, reusable, and held together with safety pins. Yep, you heard that right, safety pins. It might sound a bit old school, but this was the way to go. Parents would wash and reuse these diapers over and over, making it just another part of their daily routine. Imagine the time spent in the laundry room, but here's the interesting twist. This eco-friendly practice is making a comeback today. More and more parents who are passionate about the environment are turning back to cloth diapers, skipping the waste of disposables, and embracing a more sustainable way to care for their babies. It's pretty cool how a throwback trend is now a modern-day win for the planet.
Buddy, if you're watching this, you're expressing interest in buying this fabulous pair of mid-century lamps. It's a matching set. They're beautiful, a really shiny...
The atomic age lamp was more than just a light source, it was a statement piece. Inspired by the space race and the dawn of the nuclear era, these lamps featured bold starburst designs, sleek metallic finishes, and futuristic flair. In the 1950s, they embodied optimism and technological progress, filling mid-century homes with warm, ambient light. Whether perched on a side table or hanging from the ceiling, they turned any room into a vision of tomorrow. Today, these retro gems are highly sought after by collectors, with original models fetching impressive prices. Their striking silhouettes and atomic-inspired aesthetic make them timeless icons of mid-century modern design. If you ever spot one at a flea market, grab it. It's a glowing piece of history.
Let's pop the ice out of this one. It's already nice and clean and ready to go. And we've got another ice tray so you guys can see how it works.
Back in the day, making ice cubes wasn't as simple as just pressing a button or waiting for a tray to pop out. You'd grab a metal tray, fill it with water, and then slide it into the freezer. But here's the fun part. Once the water turned to ice, you had to work to get those cubes out. You'd grab the tray, give it a little twist, and maybe even a good shake, hoping they'd come loose. It wasn't always easy, and if you didn't have the right touch, some cubes might stick or break. It took a little muscle and some finesse. Today, we just fill up a silicone tray, give it a little wiggle, and boom, ice cubes pop right out. We got it easy now, but there's something kind of satisfying about those good old metal trays and the effort that went into it. Formica top tables were a staple of 1950s kitchens, blending style and practicality. With their sleek, easy-to-clean laminate tops and gleaming chrome legs, they fit perfectly into the era's love for modern design. Families gathered around them for home-cooked meals, while kids did homework or played board games. Unlike wood, Formica resisted stains, heat, and scratches, making it a dream for busy households. Though they faded from popularity as trends shifted, these tables are now highly collectible. Mid-century lovers prize their retro charm, often pairing them with vinyl chairs for a true 50s diner feel. If you have one tucked away, don't underestimate its value. Vintage enthusiasts are willing to pay top dollar for a well-preserved piece of atomic-age nostalgia.
Let me get these lit, and we'll see how they do. That's the ultimate test.
Even though electric lights were pretty common by the 1950s, oil lamps still had their place, especially in small towns or out in the country. They were the unsung heroes when the power went out, giving off a cozy, flickering glow that made everything feel a little more calm and homey. Think about it. When the lights went out during a storm or an unexpected blackout, those oil lamps were like a little beacon of comfort. They didn't just light up the room, they created a warm, almost magical atmosphere. It was a simple, yet reliable way of making sure you could still see, read a book, or even just sit around the table and chat with family. Those lamps weren't just tools, they were a backup plan that made everything feel a little less chaotic when life got dark.
Button hook device through the buttonhole. Grab the shirt and position the button so that it is easy for the hook to loop around it.
Back in the day, buttoning up your clothes wasn't as easy as it sounds. If you had a shirt or dress with a bunch of tiny buttons or super tight closures, you needed a special tool called a button hook. This little gadget helped you get through the struggle of trying to fasten those tricky buttons, especially if they were tucked into hard-to-reach places. Imagine trying to get dressed with your fingers slipping all over the place. It was a real challenge without this tool. The button hook made it a whole lot easier, saving you time and frustration. Plus, it was a great way to show off the stylish, intricate fashion trends of the time. The fashion may have been fancy, but getting into it was a whole other story. Until the button hook came to the rescue.
This is Gishwas 2014, and my grandma's going to show me how to wash old clothes with an old washboard.
Imagine having to scrub your clothes against a washboard. A big, ridged wooden board that you'd rub the fabric on to get it clean. Talk about a workout. It wasn't just about tossing your clothes in a machine and hitting a button. Oh no, this was hard, back-breaking labor. You had to scrub each item, rinse it out, and then repeat the process until it was clean enough to hang up to dry. Laundry day could easily become an all-day event, and it wasn't exactly fun. But hey, at least you got a pretty good arm workout out of it. Plus, you really got to know your clothes on a personal level because, let's face it, you were in there with them for a while.
There's this push-pull converter, which we may recognize from Indian pens, noodler pens.
Back in the day, if you wanted to write something important or fancy, a fountain pen was the go-to tool. These pens didn't just have ink cartridges like we're used to today. Nope, you had to fill them up by hand, usually from a little ink bottle. The ink flowed super smoothly, making your handwriting look all fancy and elegant, almost like you were writing with magic. But here's the catch. You had to be super careful. One wrong move and you'd have ink smudges all over your page, or worse, a big ink stain on your shirt. And don't even get started on the leaks. Those pens weren't always the most reliable. But hey, they had style, and if you took the time to master them, your writing looked amazing. It was a whole process, but that's what made it special. Back in the day, homes that were heated with coal had these cool chutes built right into the walls. These chutes connected the outside to the basement or storage areas where all that coal was kept. When the delivery truck came, they'd literally dump huge amounts of coal down these chutes, kind of like a coal waterfall. Sure, it was super messy with coal dust everywhere, but it was the only way to keep the house warm in the freezing months. Imagine the sound of that heavy coal hitting the basement floor. Thud, thud, thud. It was an essential part of everyday life back then. And if you wanted to stay cozy during a cold winter, you had to embrace the mess and the hard work of coal delivery. Cozy warmth? Yes. Cleanliness? Not so much. Back in the 1950s, mid-century modern design was the thing, and one of its signature features was furniture with those cool, pointy, hairpin legs. Think tables, chairs, and even sofas with super sleek, minimalist frames that looked like they were made for a stylish, space-age future. These designs were everywhere, and they gave a whole new vibe to living rooms and offices. Today, you can still find these iconic pieces popping up in stores, but the originals, they're like gold. People are snapping them up as vintage treasures because they've got that perfect blend of retro charm and timeless style. It's crazy how something from decades ago is now seen as the height of cool, right? If you're lucky enough to find one, you're holding on to a little piece of history and a major design win.
Get the focus. Made in the USA. There you go. Every single one of these, probably. This one down here says Brookfield on it.
Back in the day, telegraph and telephone lines weren't just held up by wires. They had these colorful little glass insulators that did a super important job. They kept the electrical currents from grounding, which helped prevent problems with the lines. You'd see these glass insulators all along the utility poles, sparkling in the sun like little gems, adding a pop of color to the landscape. Fast forward to today, and these glass beauties are no longer just part of the scenery. They've become cool collectibles, cherished by people who love hunting for vintage treasures. It's kind of wild to think about how something that once was so common is now a rare find that can remind us of simpler times.
Today we're going to be looking at a shoe scanning machine from the early 30s. So as you can see here, we have a couple of the models of the...
Back in the day, shoe stores had this wild contraption called a fluoroscope. It was basically a fancy X-ray machine, but instead of getting your bones scanned for health reasons, you'd stick your feet in it to see the bones inside your shoes. It was a pretty cool way to make sure your shoes fit just right. You'd slip your feet into the machine and bam, there it was, a live view of your foot skeleton, helping you figure out if those new kicks were the perfect size. Sounds pretty futuristic, right? Well, it was for its time, but over the years, people started to get a little worried about the radiation, and the fluoroscope was eventually phased out. Still, it's one of those quirky pieces of history you can't help but laugh about now.
A vintage lunchbox collection. I grew up, happened to take my lunch to school. We never got to buy our lunches at school. And so I grew up with the old metal lunchboxes. And
back in the day, taking your lunch to school or work wasn't just about what was inside the box, it was about the box itself. People carried their meals in tough metal lunchboxes that were often decorated with cool characters, cartoons, or the latest pop culture trends. Whether it was a superhero, a popular television show, or a favorite movie, these lunchboxes were as much a part of your personality as your actual lunch. Along with these boxes came a trusty thermos, usually filled with something like hot soup or a cold drink, ready to keep you fueled for the day. These lunchboxes were like a little piece of home, making lunchtime feel special. And let's be real, didn't we all secretly wish we had the coolest lunchbox on the block?
Keep meatier, beets keep beatier, chips keep chippier, dips keep dippier, Tupperware freshness, that's our promise. Look at all the ways we keep it.
In the 1950s, Tupperware wasn't just about storing leftovers. It was a cultural phenomenon. Tupperware parties became the ultimate social event, where housewives gathered to chat, laugh, and witness the magic of airtight food storage. The bright, pastel-colored containers symbolized modern convenience and post-war prosperity. Their innovative burping lids kept food fresher for longer, a game-changer in American kitchens. Over time, these once common kitchen staples turned into sought-after collectibles. Today, vintage Tupperware sets, especially in rare colors or complete collections, can fetch impressive prices at auctions.